Early morning is a time of magic in Cannery Row. In the grey time after the light has come and before the sun has risen, the row seems to hang suspended out of time in a silvery light. The street lights go out and the weeds are a brilliant green. The corrugated iron of the canneries glows with the pearly lucency of platinum or old pewter. No automobiles are running then. The street is silent of progress and business, and the rush and drag of the waves can be heard as they splash in among the piles of the canneries. It is a time of great peace, a deserted time, a little era of rest. Cats drip over the fences and slither like syrup over the ground to look for fish heads. Silent, early morning dogs parade majestically, picking and choosing judiciously whereon to pee. The seagulls come flapping in to sit on the cannery roofs to await the day of refuse. They sit on the roof peaks shoulder to shoulder. From the rocks near the Hopkins marine station comes the barking of sea lions like the baying of hounds. The air is cool and fresh. In the back gardens, the gophers push up the morning mounds of fresh, damp soil, and they creep out and drag flowers into their holes. Very few people about, just enough to make it seem more deserted than it is. One of Dora's girls comes home from a call on a patron too wealthy or too sick to visit the Bear Flag. Her makeup is a little sticky and her feet are tired. Li Chong brings the garbage cans out and stands them on the curb. The old Chinaman comes out of the sea and flaps across the street and up past the palace. The cannery watchmen look out and blink at the morning light. The bouncer at the Bear Flag steps out on the porch in his shirt sleeves and scratches and yawns and scratches his stomach. The snores of McMalley's tenets in the pipes have a deep, tunnely quality. It is the hour of the pearl, the interval between day and night, when time stops and examines itself. On such a morning and in such a light, 2 soldiers and 2 girls strolled easily along the street. They had come out of La Ida, and they were very tired and very happy. The girls were hefty, big-breasted, and strong, and their blonde hair was in slight disarray. They wore painted rayon party dresses, wrinkled now and clinging to their convexities. And each girl wore a soldier's cap, one far back on her head, and the other with the visor down almost on her nose. They were full-lipped, broad-nosed, hippie girls, and they were very tired. The soldiers' tunics were unbuttoned and their belts were threaded through their epaulets. The ties were pulled down a little so that shirts' collars could be unbuttoned. And the soldiers wore the girls' hats, one a tiny yellow straw boater with a bunch of daisies on the crown, the other a white knitted half-hat to which medallions of blue cellophane adhered. They walked holding hands, swinging their hands rhythmically. The soldier on the outside had a large brown paper bag filled with cold canned beer. They strolled softly in the pearly light. They had had a hell of a time, and they felt good. They smiled delicately like weary children remembering a party. They looked at one another and smiled, and they swung their hands. Past the Bear Flag they went and said hiya to the bouncer who was scratching his stomach. They listened to the snores from the pipes and laughed a little. At Li Chong's they stopped and looked into the messy display window where tools and clothes and food crowded for attention. Swinging their hands and shuffling their feet, they came to the end of Cannery Row and turned up to the railroad track. The girls climbed up on the rails and walked along, and the boys put their arms around the plump waists to keep them from falling. Then they went past the boatworks and turned down the park-like property of the Hopkins marine station. There is a tiny curved beach in front of the station, a miniature beach with little reefs. The gentle morning waves licked up the beach and whispered softly. The fine smell of seaweed came from the exposed rocks. As the 4 came to the beach, a sliver of sun broke over Tom Wook's land across the head of the bay, and it gilded the water and made the rocks yellow. The girls sat formally down in the sand and straightened their skirts over their knees. One of the soldiers punched holes in the 4 cans of beer and handed them around. And then the men lay down and put their heads in the girls' laps and looked up into their faces, and they smiled at each other. a tired and peaceful and wonderful secret. From up near the station came the barking of a dog. The watchman, a dark and surly man, had seen them, and his black and surly cocker spaniel had seen them. He shouted at them, and when they did not move, he came down on the beach, and his dog barked monotonously. "Don't you know you can't lay around here? You got to get off. This is private property." The soldiers did not even seem to hear him. They smiled on, and the girls were stroking their hair over the temples. At last, in slow motion, one of the soldiers turned his head so that his cheek was cradled between the girl's legs. He smiled benevolently at the caretaker. "Why don't you take a flying bug at the moon?" he said kindly, and he turned back to look at the girl. The sun lighted her blonde hair, and she scratched him over one ear. They didn't even see the caretaker go back to his house.